Hey everybody. So I'm going to read to you out of this book. It's called Original Gangsters. The Untold Story of Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, Ice Cube, Tupac Shakur, and the Birth of West Coast Rap by Ben Westhoff. This is chapter 1. It's called The Stash. He was the trash-talking, gun-toting hustler who brought the image of the young Compton street kid, tough, aggressive, and sick of being stepped on to the mainstream. He rose faster and changed popular music more than anyone else, becoming not just a performer known for his hypnotic rap cadence, but a behind the scenes mogul who upset the status quo and enriched himself in the process. He aimed to shock, but his lyrics were only as exhilarating as his life itself. He was a womanizer and a family man, a devoted friend and a brutal adversary, capable of the same type of violence that would come to define the music movement he launched. When he appeared on a 1993 episode of the Arsenio Hall Show, the most introduced film as the godfather of gangster rap. But back in 1985, before he became known as Eazy-E, he was Eric Wright, the 21-year-old neighborhood drug pusher. While pals from Southeast Compton slept off hangovers, Eric would often start his days early. He read the Los Angeles Times before putting on a white t-shirt and white tube socks pulled high above his blue crocus sack shoes. A paper and opaque sunglasses known as locks completed the look. The days tended to be bright and scorching on South Murrah Avenue, the treeless Compton street he called home. Unlike lots of other poor families in the area, his was stable. Dad worked at the post office and mom at a Montessori school. Eric, however, didn't fly so straight. Before leaving home, he stretched his sock's elastic band with one finger and crammed in a roll of bills. He'd keep 2,000 in his sock at all times, said Arnold Big A White, a childhood friend. Eric had stashes of cash everywhere. He kept some in his parents' garage and even a few dollars in the pockets of his Levi's 501s. But his sock was where he kept the bulk of his traveling cash. If someone hit him up, maybe a homeless guy or someone trying to rob him, he could simply pull out his pockets and shrug his shoulders. In the last couple of years, rap's popularity had exploded in the neighborhood, and Eric sometimes thought about getting into hip hop, but he kept that idea mostly to himself. He focused on the game. Sure, Eric wasn't the biggest drug dealer in the area, but he was doing very well. Free-base cocaine was exploding in Los Angeles. Everyone suddenly wanted the stuff, strung out women with kids, glassy-eyed old guys walking around, everyone. People came to Compton from miles around to get the goods. Crack would soon wreck the community, but no one really knew where things were headed just yet. Even the police didn't know what to make of this seemingly innocuous, odorless stuff. They would catch you with crack and you just give you a slap on the wrist, said Mark Big Man Rucker, Eazy's drug dealing partner. The influx of crack money was everywhere. Folks showed off gold chains and drove Nissan trucks, tricked out as lowriders, riding on low profile tires. But as drug dealing became increasingly lucrative, territory disputes erupted. Then everybody's trying to expand out, said Vince Edwards, a computer rapper known as CPO Boss Hog. 1 or 2 blocks is not enough. We need another neighborhood. Eric himself didn't get high. He didn't even drink. He told friends he didn't like the taste of malt liquor. But mainly, he knew sobriety gave him a mental advantage. At only 5'4" or so, he needed people to take him seriously. Though he had money and the gear that came with it, he had all the tight cars, clothes, and all that, said Lorenzo Patterson, his neighbor who became NWA member MC Rand. He was careful not to flaunt his wealth. He stayed low-key, wasn't flashy. He wasn't the type to talk a lot either. Sporting a jerry curl and a thin mustache, the man behind the locks was guarded and shy. After all, his line of work put a premium on discretion. When it came to women, however, Eric was a vivacious seducer. He had a baby boy named after himself with his girlfriend, Darnitra, who was pregnant again, and he also had another woman pregnant at the same time named Linda. I'm Eazy-E. I got women galore. You might have a lot of women, but I got much more, he would later rap. Before long, he took on a steady girlfriend, Joyce, who later bore his 4th child, Derek, when Eric was 23. Joyce had diminishing degrees of success trying to keep Eric faithful and took to calling him the community dick because he kept getting caught with other women. One time, Joyce got so angry with him that she threw a lunchbox at Eric's head. Tracy Jernagan later became another of Eric's favorites. But when Eric got her and yet another woman pregnant at the same time, Jernagan was furious. I was hearing from everyone, that's your boyfriend, but this other girl's pregnant, having his baby right now, she said. Eric and Rucker, the fellow dealer, engaged in a long running competition they called baby races to see who could get the most women pregnant. Eric would win, fathering 10 in total. Still, Eric bought Jernagan expensive gifts, including Gucci watches and a new 1989 Acura Legend. But when she arrived at the house one night and Eric wouldn't come out, she was sure she'd caught him cheating. Jernagan decided to enact revenge. She backed her Acura halfway up the block in order to get some momentum and aimed it directly at Eric's new BMW 750 IL, which was parked on the street. The idea was to get him to come outside and just face me. She remembers thinking, but things didn't go according to plan. Somehow my car went up like it lifted up almost two wheels, she said. When it landed, it was undrivable. The whole thing is kind of a blur from there. Eric's other woman came out and tried to tangle with her, but eventually Jernagan called Eric's sister to pick her up. Eric Wright spoiled his kids regularly, so this part is called sets. Eric Wright spoiled his kids regularly, taking them to Disneyland or Chuck E. Cheese's. When we had an outside or a weekend together, we all went, Eric Wright Jr. recalled. To us, he was the biggest and baddest thing walking. He could also be a sadistic prankster. He'd draw a gopher out of his hole in the backyard by squirting lighter fluid down in it, and then light the animal on fire and watch it run around. He might take a giant ball of crack and taunt crackheads with it. What would you do for this? He'd ask, and then just laugh in his rear way without opening his mouth very wide. He could be funny and menacing at the same time. I used to think his voice was crazy, said MC Rand. He called my brother, and he'd be like, "Hey, Charlie," in his little voice. Before becoming a dealer, Eric worked some dead-end jobs. He considered going out for the post office like his old man, even taking the civil service test. But that life wasn't for him. I hate working for somebody else, he said. Eric and his family didn't have tons of money growing up, but they never lacked. His parents taught him to be a self-starter, though they probably didn't intend for him to be a drug dealer. He had a vision to succeed, so when it came to his drug business, he didn't fool around. He only worked with his people he trusted. A typical day might start with him prepping his stash of cocaine in the garage and getting into his boat-length 1973 Chevy Caprice, maroon with a white vinyl top called a glass house for the long mirrors surrounding the cabin. It wasn't the only slick car Eric owned. At various points in the 80s, he also drove a Nissan truck, a pink Suzuki Jeep with a candy paint, and Volkswagen Bugs, including one of 1960s vintage with the Freaks Come Out at Night decaled on the back window in honor of Brooklyn rap group Houdini's hit song. Eric would pilot the Caprice less than a mile over to Atlantic Drive, pulling up where East Caldwell Street came to an end. This was particularly dangerous gang's nexus controlled by the Atlantic Drive Compton Crips, with other sets including the Neighborhood Crips, the Kelly Park Crips, and the South Side Crips all nearby. All wanted to grow their drug business. It was a powder keg, said CPO Boss Hogg. The Crips were established in South Central in 1969 by muscle-bound teenager Raymond Washington, who enlisted a fearsome high school friend named Stanley Tukey Williams. They formed an alliance to battle other local gangs. I thought I can cleanse the neighborhood of all these, marauding gangs, Williams said, but I was totally wrong, and eventually we morphed into the monster we were addressing. In 1979, Williams was convicted of murder and was put to death by lethal injection in 2005. Washington, who hated guns but loved to scrap, Raymond would take his shirt off and fight his ass off all day long, an acquaintance said, was murdered in 1979. Adopting their signature color blue, in the early 70s, the Crips attempted to expand their turf into Compton, which had its own neighborhood sets. Guys living on and around Pearl Street near Centennial High School banded together to defend themselves, forming the Pyrus. The group included Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens, who are credited with founding the Bloods, which enveloped sets including the Brems and the Bounty Hunters from the Nickerson Gardens housing projects in Watts. They took red as their color, owing to the fact that the Pyrus were called roosters, the Bounty Hunters were called blobs, and the Brems used to put red stem matches in their hats. Both sects splintered and mutated across this country, and their rivalries Sometimes their own members became increasingly bloody. By the time Eric became a young man, the Crips and the Bloods, along with Latino gangs, had divided up Compton between them and were on their way to taking over the region. It's not hard to understand the appeal. In neighborhoods where there's no work, high crime, and crumbling family structures, joining forces with other disillusioned kids helped create pride and a sense of unity. But along with pride and unity came violence. In 1984, there were about 200 gangland killings in LA County. 1988 saw almost 500, and by the early 90s, an estimated 100,000 gang members were spread across the country. It's not entirely clear which Crip subsect Eric represented. The gang hadn't yet fully splintered, and really most of the Crip factions in this part of town liked Eric. It didn't hurt that he sold them high-quality coke at great prices. But that didn't make him a serious gangbanger. Sure, he sometimes wore blue, but he didn't do drive-bys and he didn't seek retribution against other sets. That wasn't how he rolled. He was about his money, pure and simple. Atlantic Drive was the name of an apartment building out of which he sometimes operated, and also the name of its street. The unglamorous two-story stucco spot housed a few dozen families, but it was especially effective as a 24-hour drug market. Its C-shaped layout prevented most of the units from being seen from the street, which meant interested buyers could approach without a fear of police observation. Buyers could get everything from crack and angel dust to weed or marijuana joints or Nat Sherman cigarettes dipped in PCP. Though there was plenty of foot traffic, the building managed to keep something of a low profile. After making purchases, buyers were quickly escorted out. No smoking on the premises. It was the perfect dealing zone. Gangs were involved with the drug trade, but there was little established hierarchy. If someone saw you were a hustler and they'd front you some, said rapper JD, who dealt on Compton's Poinsetta Avenue. It was always on consignment, and everyone had a beeper and one of those big brick phones you put in your pocket and your pants fell off. Dealers would keep their supplies at a stash house, a spot inhabited by a drug addict whom they paid in crack, maybe a gram a day. We called them the house man or the house lady, said JD, adding that he felt no guilt about selling people such a nauseous drug. Our philosophy was we didn't put a gun to their head. JD, who went on to fame as a member of Ice Cube's group, the Lynch Mob, specialized in curb serving, selling to people hand to hand on the street, like a drive-through Taco Bell. Customers included anyone from McDonald's, Douglas employees who drove over from Long Beach to addicts from the neighborhood. He kept his money between his insole and the bottom of his shoe. That way you could run away with it, and once he made 1,000, he would take it home and come back fresh. Eric didn't do deals with just anyone on the street. He sold wholesale, and only to clients he knew, including cousins working out of the Atlantic Drive apartments. If he recognized a number on his pager, he'd call back on a payphone. Of course, you needed to know the codes. For an 8-ball, an 8/8 of an ounce, the page should include an 8. The code for a half ounce, meanwhile, was 12. If something left off, Eric simply didn't do the deal. One slip-up could mean the end. Compton hustlers didn't play around. Eric had only to remember Horace Butler. So this is from the book Original Gangsters. That I read through page 7 of chapter 1. I will continue later, so please tune in for more. If you like the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and message. Peace.